talk about listening, the amazing healing power of listening, really listening to people, and how it can transform us all. So, you're going to have to be thinking about whether or not you're a good listener. I watched a video on this about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, something like that, and I've been thinking about it ever since. So I can't wait to dig in. So share this out, get your people on here, because you want the people in your life to be good listeners. So hopefully this will give us all a lesson in listening. I've read, actually not lately, but in the past, I've read at least I think 2 books about listening. I think one of them was called The Listening Life or something like that. And I watched a video not too long ago by Richard Bliss BROOKE. He is a business coach type guy, and I love him so much. I've read a couple of his books. He has a book called The 4-Year Career and a book called Mach 3 with Your Hair on Fire. Basically talking about building business with integrity and how to be a good human while you do it. So he was coming at it from a business perspective, but I've been thinking about it nonstop. And it has really, you know how when you start to pay attention to something, you realize, first of all, how bad you have been at it? Oh my word. And so I've just been thinking about it nonstop, so I thought we'd chat about it this morning. Well, let me ask you this before we get started. How many of you, put a 1 in the chat box if you would say that you are a really good listener, that you don't listen to people just waiting for what you can say next, but you really try to hear their story, and instead of following up with something that you want to say, you're conscientious about following up with questions to get more insight into their story. If you feel like you kind of have the gift of listening or you're a good listener, put a 1 in the chat box. If you feel like, oh my word, I almost didn't watch this live stream because I'm a terrible listener. I'm so distracted. I am always thinking of what I should be doing. I might have to put a 1.5 in the chat box. So tell me, give me your listening, confess all of your listening woes right now. I would not give myself a 1 on this. I don't know if I would give myself a 2. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. When I'm paying attention, I feel like I'm a good listener, and I follow up with questions, but it's so easy to be distracted, to be thinking about what you should be doing, to be thinking about what you're about to say, to not really listen. And after today, I think you're gonna be a better listener. So in this video that Richard Bliss BROOKE did, he talked about, by the way, I should say thank you to my friend Candace, who linked this video into one of my groups, and that's how I saw it. I follow him anyways, but I don't catch everything he does. But when he was talking about this, and he was talking about the power of therapeutic listening, and how often when people start talking, we're not so much listening to them as we are listening to what is going on in our own head about how we're going to respond. We're agreeing or disagreeing, and as soon as we agree with them, we tune them out. As soon as we disagree with them, we tune them out, like, well, this person has nothing to say to me because I don't agree with that. Or we're listening to the voice in our own head that says, well, here's what my response is going to be. That so few people actually listen to someone else without having this loop going in their own head. You're basically just listening to yourself. That's what he was trying to say, I think. And oh my gosh, I was so convicted. I'm like, so I started paying attention to every time I'm talking to somebody but not really listening. And he gave the tip that pay attention next time when you're talking to someone, and pay attention to when your mind starts to drift. And what does it drift to? Do you start listening to the voice in your own head about how you're going to formulate your response? Are you weighing them out, judging them, agreeing, disagreeing, and thus forming your own response? Pay attention to when you do that, and redirect yourself to really listen, to hear what they're saying, because really, people just need to be heard. They need to be seen and heard and known. And if you can bear witness to their stories and their life, even if you don't have anything profound to say, just you bearing witness to their stories and really hearing their stories is so therapeutic. It's very healing to people to hear each other's stories. And so often we don't really hear each other's stories because we're just thinking of our next story that we're gonna talk about, how we're gonna respond, what we're gonna say next. Like, they start telling a story and then we think, oh, I have a better story related to that. I do that all the time. Like, somebody was telling me yesterday about their camping experience, and he was talking about how they would drive up to the mountain and drive up to these campsites, and then they basically would camp out of their truck, the back of their truck, and they would have a little stove, and they would bring fresh vegetables. Well, of course, I had to one-up him and say, oh my gosh, well, we got into camping last year, but we didn't have a truck. We basically, had our tents on our back and hiked to the top of a mountain, and then we had to, like, and I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean it like that. Do you know what I'm saying? But so often we're just waiting for someone to finish so that we can tell our story about how we did it longer or better or harder or whatever. And I'm so guilty of that. And because I've been thinking about listening, about halfway through my story, I was like, okay, how can I shut up and ask him more about his camping? So I did. I corrected myself and I shut up and I said, so tell me, like, what kind of stuff do you cook when you're up there? That's so cool. Meanwhile, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, nice for you that you have, like, fresh vegetables and a thing, because Stevie and I, all we had was powdered soup. Even still, after I corrected myself, I was still in my head thinking about my own story. It reminds me of how hard it is to be a good listener. It's so hard to really just listen, to hear someone's story, to bear witness to their life, to their struggle, to ask them questions, to try to understand, to help them feel known and seen and heard, instead of making sure we are known and seen and heard. And since I've been paying attention, let's just say, after I listened to the video, I thought to myself, I don't know, I'm a pretty good listener. So I started paying attention. For a straight week and a half, I've paid attention. And every time I would talk to somebody, you guys, you pay attention. I want you to do this for a solid week. It will floor you what bad listeners we are. And how often we are just trying to think of our next thing. We're not really paying attention. We're not really listening. So that is your challenge for this week. Really pay attention and listen. And as soon as your mind starts to drift, figure out, how can you come back? How can you recover it? How can you come back and ask a question? Be curious. Ask a question that will help them tell their story even more. It's so much harder than it sounds. And I don't think you will realize how often you do it until you pay attention. I don't think you will realize how often your mind wanders and how often you can't wait to get a word in edgewise. It's incredible. It has so convicted me this week that one of my, okay, let me ask you this. Who are you the worst listener for? Here's what I found. The people that I love the most, I'm the worst listener to the people I love the most. My own kids, my own husband. So many times my girls say, Mom, are you listening? Okay, if your kids are saying, Mom, are you listening? You're not listening. So it is such a goal of mine in the next few months that are left of this year that I am going to practice being a good listener. I am going to look them in the eyes, and I'm going to listen to their stories, and I'm going to ask questions. You know, my little Ellie, she was gone for 5 weeks, and she was gone to a dance camp, and we talked a bunch in between there, but she had a lot of stories to tell, you know, when I picked her up. And of course, I've been thinking about listening a lot. So it's funny how even though I was so happy to see her and I couldn't wait to hear all the details and I couldn't wait to hear, it's probably 5-10 minutes and I'm already like, you know, I'm already drifting. So I want you to pay attention, especially with your husband, especially with your kids. What kind of listener are you, and how can you take little steps to be a better listener? When we hear each other's stories, it's so therapeutic. Those of you who read my book and who y'all have sent me, I'm telling you, the most precious messages. Here's the thing. The messages that you have sent me made me know that you really heard my heart, that you've heard my story, that you walked through my childhood with me, that you were willing to bear witness to my life. What a gift. What an incredible gift that has been to me. And that is what we're here to do for each other. We're here to bear witness to each other's stories, to our struggles, to our lives. And we can't do that if we don't really listen. So I want you to work on it this week. I want you to be a therapeutic listener. I want you to listen to people with the intent that your listening will help heal them. Your attention and your curiosity and your interest in their lives will be a healing balm to them. So I am so excited to continue to do this. I'm getting ready to go on vacation, so it's a great time to practice. And listen today. Pay attention to how you're listening, and when you start to drift, correct yourself and come back in and listen with the intent of being a healing balm to other people. All right, love ya. See you soon.